Hello and welcome back. Today we're going to look at some early season trends and some players who are off to really hot starts. I'll highlight guys who are mostly available on the waiver wire and we'll help you find some value there as well. Now we'll break it down by position and then by metric, which means we have a lot to cover, so let's jump right in. So what you're looking at now is a very crude first draft of what will become the player hub. And right now we've got a bunch of metrics over on the side. We're filtering or sorting, I guess, by point per game numbers right here. You can see Panarin at 2.4 points per game, 12 points in 5 games, 5 of those on the power play, and he's still shooting, so that's great news. Kucherov off to a crazy start, 9 points in 4 games with 7 goals. I believe he leads the league in goals right now. We'll go over that in just a minute. As we get through this list, it is worth noting that there is an obvious small sample size bias here, so some guys will regress. These are not, numbers to base your decisions off of in terms of finding guys that have one game like Macklin Celebrini and saying, okay, he's a 2-point per game player. That's not the case. Obviously, sample size plays a factor, but some guys are off to great starts, and we want to recognize that. So just looking off the top here, Evgeny Malkin, 1.83 points per game. I don't know if he's ever hit that in his career for an extended stretch, but this is crazy what he's doing. 1.5 assists per game, 9 assists in only 6 games, 11 points, 4 of those on the power play, 97th percentile there. Doing it all with not that much shot volume. Doesn't really hit a lot, gets a couple blocks, but really nice start for Evgeny Malkin. He was very deeply drafted, late in your drafts. I picked him up in one of my leagues, but in most leagues he went either undrafted or very, very late. So that was excellent value if you grabbed him there. The rest of these guys, there's a bunch here that are first rounders. You can obviously tell why they are first rounders. Up here at the top, we've got Dylan Strome. He's been a really nice surprise. He's at 38% ownership right now, 1.75 points per game. You're getting no hits out of him, a couple blocks, but power play, he's on the first unit. He's playing top line minutes. He's got 1.75 points per game, 7 points in only 4 games. The Caps do have a bunch of games to make up, so that's worth noting as well. We'll get into some of these other guys, but just right off the top, just looking at some of these guys, Tom Wilson, Chinakhov, McCann, Barbashev, off to really good starts and guys that you wouldn't necessarily expect. So let's break it down by position. Let's take a look at the centers, and Dylan Strome is going to pop up on that list. I'm not sure exactly why the font changed, but this is the stuff that pisses me off daily with this stupid platform. But nonetheless, the centers, you've got Macklin Celebrini with the low sample size, 1 game, 2 points per game. You've got Malkin, who we just went over, Dylan Strome. A little bit further down, it's unfortunate. Kent Johnson is now out for an extended period of time. He was off to a really good start, 1.25 points per game, getting it done on the power play as well, but he's out for the foreseeable future. You've got Logan Stankoven, which a lot of you were on the train earlier in, once training camp ended and they started the season and he was on the first line, people were starting to pay attention to that. He's got 7 points in 6 games, all assists and only 1 on the power play. Shot volume, a little bit low for my taste, but with that said, the assist volume is really nice. I think he's been bumped back to the 3rd line, but all 3 lines in Dallas should be rosterable in fantasy because you've got guys like Sagan, you've got guys like Duchesne who have been fantasy relevant so far, so this is not necessarily a bad thing, and he's dual position eligible, center, right wing. He's at 43% ownership. You could do a lot worse than that if you're in a 12-team league and he's available. You also have Anton Lundell, who's filling in for Sasha Barkov on the top line. 3.29 shots per game is really nice to see out of a younger player who's stepping into that number 1 role. He's on the power play now, 0.29 power play points per game, 86th percentile there, 2 power play points on the season, 8 points in 7 games, a nice even 4-goal, 4-assist split, and he's above a point per game, so that's nice to see. You're also getting a little bit of hits, just under a hit per game, and a couple blocks there, which isn't going to be the main reason you're grabbing him. You're grabbing him for that line assignment, and he's been paying off really nicely for you if you grabbed him earlier on. He's at 33%, and they're technically calling him a center right wing, so for what it's worth, he is also dual eligible. I would definitely go and scoop him up right now if you have the ability to do so. Winnipeg off to a really great start, and you've got Vlad Namestnikov, who is available on your wire, 5%. Center, left wing, dual eligible. He's at a point per game right now, doing it on the power play, 3 power play points in 4 games, a hit, a block, so really small sample size, but if you want exposure to Winnipeg players, this is one of the only guys that you can get. Could maybe get Cole Perfetti off the waiver wire, but with that said, Namestnikov, the dual eligibility is nice, and he's at a point per game right now. So if they have a good week in terms of the schedule, that's definitely a guy worth looking at. You have Tyler Sagan, 24%, center right wing, dual eligible. He's day-to-day right now. lower body injury. He's been out the last 3 games, which is why his sample size is lower, but he's averaging a point per game over that span. Shot volume is low, but he does like to shoot the puck in general, so this is a small sample size type of thing. We talked about Stefan Nason on the weekly video, last video that I did, and he's at a point per game. Shot volume very low for him, but the hits are really nice, 2.38 hits per game. Nason's at 14%. He's a left wing, right wing. I'm not sure why it's listing him as a center. We're back to the Rotowire data set in terms of what this is mainly based off of, so the positions are not going to be the same as Yahoo. But with that said, Nason dual eligible left wing, right wing in Yahoo, 14%, and he's probably there for you in a 12-team league. The Devils have a nice schedule this week as well. Sean Monahan playing really well, 5 points in 5 games, 2 goals, 3 assists. The shot volume is nice, 3.2 shots per game. Power play time, he's on the number 1 power play unit, and that unit's been pretty good so far. They've got Werenski going. They've got basically all their big dogs. They've got Cole Sillinger playing on that top unit as well, so if you can grab him and you want that power play exposure. But Monahan's only 15% owned, single position, so a little bit worse in terms of the flexibility, but 15% is really nice. And they do have a 2-game week this week, so maybe not the week to pick him up, but looking forward into the future, this is a guy that will probably stay in the top 6 and on the top power play, so 15% is really nice for Monahan. You also have Granlund down here. He's dual eligible, 27% ownership. He's at a point per game, mostly, in fact, all assists, 5 assists in 5 games, 2 of those on the power play, but the shot volume is really nice. And then the power play numbers, he's, when Celebrini is back, I don't know if he stays or doesn't, but I would imagine he does. He's a relatively skilled player, really good setup guy. So he's going to get you those assists, and the shot volume is nice. That means something is going to go in the near future. It's bound to happen. You can take a look at the Moneypuck expected goals metric and see who might be due to break out. Guys like Dylan Cousins have been shooting a lot. Granlund have been shooting a lot with no success. So that could be an indicator. We might look at that in the future, but for now, we'll just keep it going. There's a couple of other guys down here. You could get Domi. You could get Pospisil. They're off to good starts, but Marco Rossi, 10% ownership. He's a single position center. He's on a 4-game point streak right now, 2.4 shots per game. So 10%, he's probably available in even 14-team leagues, and that's something to keep an eye on as he is a point-per-game guy. Minnesota is giving their younger players a little bit more runway right now, and so with that said, Rossi is one of the more experienced younger players, so he could factor in the top 6. That top line is going really well. Zuccarello, Kaprizov, you've got Boldy who's starting to get it going, so a number of good things going on in Minnesota. They've got good goaltending as well. Now let's shift to the left wingers, and this is going to feature Artemi Panarin at 2.4 points per game. That's kind of a crazy pace, and if you're looking at the shot volume is the thing to keep an eye on because he never used to do that. He did it last year, and now he's continuing that this year, so if you drafted Panarin probably in the 2nd round, that's paying off really nicely for you off this top of the season. You've got Kaprizov right behind him, a little bit further back at 1.6 points per game, 8 points in 5, and a lot of those on the power play. Looking at some guys you can get, Jared McCann, he's 65% owned, so maybe in a shallower league you can get him, but 8 points in 6 games, 2 of those on the power play. And don't look now, but the Seattle Kraken can actually score again. They've scored 4+ goals in each of their last 3 or 4 games. So McCann at a center left wing dual eligible player and kind of available at 65% if you're in a shallow league. This is a guy to keep an eye on for the goal coverage. Usually better shot volume, and then he does get a couple peripherals, but he is giving that power play exposure as well. One of the early season top stories was Ivan Barbashev and Jack Eichel. They were lighting it up the first couple games of the year. He's cooled off a little bit, but 4 goals, 4 assists, 8 points in 6 games, and you're getting the hits. 1.17 hits is really not bad at all for a forward. The shot volume needs to come up a little bit for him to sustain this, but he is relatively available at 62% in a shallow league. He's dual eligible center left wing. A little bit further down, Marchenko is a right winger. This is obviously wrong, but 1.2 points per game is really nice to see. The shot volume does need to come up for that to be sustainable, but you can see here 6 points in 5 games, 1 power play point. You could do a lot worse. He is on the top power play unit. He's 9% owned, so he's a little bit more available than a lot of the other guys that we've been talking about so far, and he is factoring pretty high on this list. And then a guy who used to factor on this list and hasn't for a while, and it is a small sample size, we do have to say that, but 6 points in 5 games for Jonathan Huberdeau. Shot volume still really, really low, and that's been his Achilles heel in fantasy for a long time. He also doesn't hit. But the power play numbers are nice. That line assignment, he's playing with Anthony Mantha and I believe Pospisil, and they've been playing pretty well together. So you could get some exposure via Mantha, or you could just ride it out with Huberdeau, who is dual eligible right now, and he's at 49% ownership, center left wing. So he might be available in a 12-team league. Now, another guy who's kind of in that same middle 40s, 50% ownership, 57%, is Teuvo Teravainen. He's playing top line with Connor Bedard, so that's why you would want him. 5 power play points, that's also why you'd want him. 99th percentile there. He's above a point per game, 7 points in 6 games, 3 goals, 4 assists, and they come in bunches with him. He doesn't give you much peripherals, but you do get bunches of goals when they're on, when their power play is humming. He's going to benefit from that, so you could do a lot worse at 57% than Teuvo Teravainen. He's got the dual position eligibility, left wing, right wing. A little bit further down, we do have to talk about Ross Colton. He's a guy who is, again, dual eligible center left wing, and this is a guy that I picked up. He's 44% rostered right now, 5 points in 5 games, but look at the peripherals. 3.6 shots, 3.6 hits per game, and a couple of blocks. The assists are a little bit lower because he's got 4 goals in 5 games, so that's really good goal numbers, 98th percentile there. And you're getting a ton of peripherals. He's on their top power play unit. He's the bumper guy. He looks really comfortable there. Another guy that we should talk about is Casey Middlestat, who's at 36% ownership on the same team, and he's been lighting it up as well on that top power play unit. So as we switch really quickly back to this list with all players, you can see a number of the Colorado guys up at the top once it loads. You see Rantanen up here. You've got McKinnon and Makar. So these guys are still getting it done. And the only issue has been their depth and their defensive play, which has been really bad. But the power play is still really good. And so as we're looking at some of these left wingers, guys like Colton, and then the center in terms of Casey Middlestat, these guys are getting you power play 1 exposure to those elite level players. So that's a number one reason why I grabbed Ross Colton, that power play exposure, but also the peripherals, the secondary reason why I grabbed him. It's been really nice getting those shots and hits. Similar type of thing with Nick Paul. You're getting a little bit of power play exposure. He is, I believe, a center left wing dual eligible player. He's only 10% owned. Shot volume a little bit worse. Hits quite a bit worse, but still 1 hit per game is not bad at all. 4 points in 4 games, 1 of those on the power play. So a little bit fewer games, and that's something that the Tampa Bay players are going to have to deal with. They're going to make those up at some point. So the volume will come back into these Tampa Bay players. So think about that as we move forward. But he is available in a lot of different leagues, even a 14-team, maybe a 16-team league, 10% ownership. He should be there for you. As we look a little bit further down, Mason Marchment has been playing really well, 6 points in 6 games, a little bit lower shot volume, but you're getting 1.67 hits, so that's been nice as well. He is, as I check, 33% owned, single position left winger, so a little bit less valuable in that regard. And last but not least, Cole Koepka. This is a guy at 3% ownership, should be there for you in every single league size, 3.17 hits, and he's been performing. So 6 points in 6 games, 3 goals, 3 assists. Shots are pretty decent at 2 shots per game. He's a depth player, so he's not getting a ton of ice time. This is probably a low sample size event that he's on this list, but the hits volume should still be there for a guy who is, Boston has a really good bottom 6, so that should continue. They're probably going to get, I don't know, between 7 and 12 minutes per night, depending on how they're playing. And if they have a favorable schedule, or if you can get him into your lineup and you're looking for hits, this is a guy who's been doing it thus far this season. Now, as we turn to the right wingers, there's Nikita Kucherov at the top. He's been dominant to start the season, 2.25 points per game, 1.75 goals per game, 7 goals in 4 games, 9 points, 2 of those on the power play, 5.5 shots per game. That's what you like to see if you drafted him. You probably got him super high in your draft, but he's been returning some value very early on, even though they've only played the 4 games. Rantanen doing his thing. Sam Reinhart tied. He's got 7 games played, 5 goals, 12 points, so tied for the league lead, I believe. And he's been picking up right where he left off. But look at Tom Wilson all the way at the top of this list. Only 42% owned, single position right winger, scored the overtime winner in New Jersey the other night. 1.5 points per game, 1.25 goals per game, 5 goals in 4 games. He's got 1 on the power play. 3 shots per game is nice to see from him, and the hits are back. 3.25 hits per game, 1.75 blocks per game. So elite level peripheral coverage. He's back to doing what he used to do, which is score goals, shoot the puck, and hit everything that moves. And if he's going to get top 6 exposure, even middle 6 exposure, that would be worth picking him up. If you're in a shallow league, 42%, he should be there for you. In a 12 team, he might be taken already. Now, Mark Stone, really nice start, 9 points in 6 games, but we're going to slide down to Yegor Chinakhov. He's only 20% owned, single position right winger. They don't have a good schedule this week, only 2 games, but 1.4 points per game. 3 goals, 4 assists, 7 points, 3 on the power play, 3.4 shots per game. You love to see him pulling the trigger, and he's getting some hits. 1.2 hits per game is nice to see. He's going to be top line and top power play for Columbus, so this is a guy that's going to get you that exposure, and he's relatively available, probably there for you in a 12-team league, but again, maybe not the week to pick him up. Just think about that for the future weeks. Now, Tyler Toffoli is probably the next guy that you can find, maybe in a shallow league. He's at 57% ownership, dual eligible left wing, right wing. He's going to get you top line exposure in San Jose with whoever they've got there. If Celebrini comes back, you're going to get exposure to him. He's on the top power play. The positional flexibility should be nice. He's got 4 goals in 5 games, 6 points, 2 on the power play, 2.4 shots is a little bit low, but not bad. And then you're getting that top power play exposure, so it could be worse. I think this ownership is a little bit high for Toffoli, but if it starts to come down a little bit, he would be worth a flyer. And if he's available and you need a streamer, that would be a guy that I would definitely look at, especially on a Sunday afternoon when you're looking for some points to try to close out your week. Now, JJ Peterka, he was a guy that was drafted a little bit past the 10th round in most leagues, and he's been returning some value for you already. 4 goals in 5 games, 6 points, nothing on the power play, which is a little bit disappointing. No peripherals to speak of, and the shot volume is a little bit low. He is a shooter. He does like to shoot. He's been up around or above 3 shots per game in the past. Hasn't put that together yet, but the Buffalo Sabres haven't really put anything together yet either, and he's still producing. So that is nice to see. Him and Tage Thompson. Thompson has actually been performing pretty well so far, but Peterka getting elevated onto that top line, that is nice value if you drafted him. If you didn't and you want to go and grab Peterka, he's at 38% ownership right now, so he is available in some leagues, depending on the league size and how astute your players that you're playing against are. Nick Schmaltz is a center right winger who is probably available for you, 31%. Dual eligible is nice to see. No goals, but 7 assists in 6 games, a couple power play points, and the shot volume is okay. Blocks are pretty good. So this is a guy that I usually go to in a streaming week where I need to pick up one of those Utah guys. There's a bunch of guys playing for Utah that are available. You can see Gunther down here. You obviously know about Gunther. He's pretty much owned up at 69%, but you can definitely get Nick Schmaltz, and he's on the top power play. So worth a streamer if you're trying to pick up somebody from Utah. Speaking of Seattle, we talked about them earlier, scoring a lot more, and Eberle has been doing that lately. So 1.17 points per game. The goals are nice, 5 in 6. 1 power play point, shot volume really low, and no peripherals, so that is something to keep an eye on. This could be a sample size thing, but in terms of streaming options, there's a number of guys that you can go to in Seattle. Eberle's at 10% ownership, so he should be available in most leagues, and he's been really productive to start the season. So keep that in mind as you look at some Seattle Kraken to add if they have a favorable schedule. Now, this is definitely a sample size thing, but Lucas Reichel, 0% owned. He's got 2 points in 2 games. Shot volume is decent. So if you're in a 20-team league and you're complaining that I'm not giving you anything, here's Lucas Reichel for you. He did have a couple of assists last night, 1 on the Craig Smith goal. So playing a little bit deeper in the lineup, maybe not the best option, but 0%. You could do a lot worse. Last guy I want to touch on, Riley Smith. He is getting you top line or second line exposure in New York. They haven't looked particularly great, but here he is with 4 points in 5 games. The shot volume a little bit lower, but you're getting that line exposure, and he does kill penalties. So you do have the ability to potentially get some shorthanded points out of him if you have that weighting in your points league. Last but not least, let's touch on the D before we get into some of the individual metrics. And at the top, you're going to see Cale Makar. We expect to see that, but you're also going to see Jake Sanderson. He is owned up, but I just want to give him a quick shout out. 1.4 points per game. The assists are really high. The power play numbers are really high. And the blocks, 3.6 blocks, 1.2 hits per game. He's starting to look like that number one defenseman that they need. 6 power play points in 5 games. That's incredible to start the year. So even if they're giving Shabbat a little bit of power play time, it is Jake Sanderson who's been getting it done. They've been scoring a ton. Obviously, that 8-7 game against LA. And then they've had a couple of other games that have been higher scoring. So if you drafted Sanderson, congratulations. If you didn't, you can go out and grab Neil Pionk. Winnipeg still playing really well. Pionk is only 42% owned, 1.25 points per game. He usually gives you the peripherals. They haven't come around yet, so you can expect those to come any day now. And he's been getting some power play points. 2 power play points in 4 games is nice to see from a guy who isn't their power play quarterback. That would be Josh Morrissey. He's also been really good. So power play numbers a little bit, equal between the two of them. However, right now you've got a couple more blocks from Morrissey, and then the numbers are pretty identical. 5 points, 1 goal, 4 assists, 2 power play points. So Neil Pionk playing like the number one defenseman in Winnipeg, and you can get him at 42% ownership. Now, with a lot of these D, there's not a lot available on the waiver wire, so we're kind of picking from the bottom of the barrel, but there are a couple of guys to take note of. Philip Broberg, 6 points in 6 games to start the season. The shot volume really low. The peripherals are kind of low. He does hit. No blocks and no power play time thus far. The shot volume is low, but he is getting those assists. So his ice time has gone from in the 11 to 13 minute range up towards 19 minutes a game coming over to St. Louis. So that's going to impact his production, and you can see it here, 6 points in 6 games. So if you're in a really shallow league and you're looking for a guy who's hot right now, maybe not going to get you the power play exposure or the peripherals, which is something that I would prefer if I were looking for a defenseman. But if you're just looking for a guy who's hot, Philip Broberg in St. Louis putting up a point per game, and I don't know how long this lasts, but his ice time is much elevated from where it was in Edmonton. So maybe worth a flyer there. 2 guys that are definitely sample size plays, Logan Mailloux scoring in his first game of the season, and then David Jiricek. Both of these guys are 1% owned, so a point per game. Mailloux has the goal, Jiricek has the assist. Jiricek does occasionally get some power play time, but it is Zach Werenski's to lose, and he's averaging 4.4 shots per game, so he's definitely not available, but he's been killing it for you if you drafted him late in the draft. Now, OEL took over the number 1 power play in Toronto. He's got 4 points in 5 games, but no power play points yet. The shot volume is nice to see, and the hits at 1.6 hits per game is also nice to see. OEL is 39% owned, so he should be there for you in a lot of 12-team leagues, definitely in a 10-team league if you're looking for exposure to that top Toronto power play. Now, another guy you may be able to get is Mason Lohrei, 4 points in 5 games, one of those on the power play. Shot volume a little bit lower, but he's a guy with really good skill. He's not necessarily going to be their power play guy. That's usually Charlie McAvoy. They also have Hampus Lindholm, but Lohrei is a really skilled defenseman. He's really huge, got good reach, and for whatever reason, he's been off to a really good start. So this is another one of those, kind of like Broberg, where if you're looking for a guy who's not necessarily a peripherals guy or a power play guy, but who's putting up points, he's been doing it lately. I wouldn't necessarily bank on that. I would prefer to have guys with peripherals and or power play time. But speaking of peripherals, Caden Gooley, he is day-to-day, I believe, with an upper body injury, but 4 points in 5 games. 4 blocks per game is elite level, so obviously he's picking up where he left off with that. 1.4 hits per game is also really nice, and then on top of that, the point production has been really nice as well. 0.8 points per game for a guy. That's probably a low sample size type of thing, but when he comes back, he should be on your radar if you're in a league where blocks are weighted a little bit heavier. Now, if you're in that league, you can look at Jacob Trouba. He's going to get you those blocks, the hits as well. The shot volume is pretty decent, and he's been scoring. So 4 points in 5 games. He likes to throw the puck on net, and good things happen when he does that. So picking up the offensive production based off of where he's been in the past, so that's nice to see. He's only 52% owned, so he should be there for you in certain league formats or league sizes, but he's a guy that usually is a good peripherals guy, and now he's bringing in the offense too, which you like to see. Brant Clark taking over the power play in LA has been nice, 98th percentile there, 3 power play points in 5 games, 4 points total on the year. You would like to see the shot volume come up a lot more. 0.8 shots per game is not good enough. It's not existent there, but 1.6 blocks is decent. This is not the same as Drew Doughty, who would normally have way better metrics in terms of goals, shots, and hits. but he is filling in admirably on the power play with 3 power play points thus far. You also have Gostisbehere, who may be available. He's 58% owned. By the way, Clark, 32% owned, so he may be there for you as well. And really quickly, just wanted to scroll down a little bit. You have Riker Evans here, 1% owned. Another similar play, 4 points in 6 games. Not much power play time, a little bit of hitting, but he's there for you if you're in a really deep league. And then Michael Kesselring, scoring an overtime winner the other night. He's got 2 goals, 2 assists, 4 points, 6 games played. A little bit low on the shot volume, but 1.3 hits, 1.17 blocks. So filling out some peripherals, and they're still without John Marino, and then they're without Sean Dursey. So he may be elevated in that lineup. So that could be a little bit of a longer term play if you're looking for that. Now, right before we close it out, let's take a quick look at some of the metrics in terms of guys that are kicking ass at some of these things, and we'll kind of close the video out with that. As we look at the goal scorers, so you've got Kucherov with 7 goals in 4 games. That's an incredible pace. You've also got Cole Caulfield, 6 in 6. You've got Panarin with 6 goals in 5 games. Tom Wilson, 5 goals in 4 games. So Tom Wilson's one of the only guys available that you can find on the wire. As I mentioned before, he's 42% owned right now, and you're going to get the hits and the shot volume as well. So definitely go and pick up Tom Wilson. We mentioned Paul Cotter in the weekly video, 5 goals in 8 games. So he's been making a lot happen with the volume that he's gotten, 0.75 points per game as well. Ishier scoring 2 back-to-back, getting him on this list, 5 and 8. You've got Eberle, who we mentioned earlier, Gunther, who we mentioned earlier. Don't look now, Chris Kreider has a goal per game. He's going to get you the shot volume and the power play exposure as well. Toffoli, we mentioned, with 4 and 5. Thompson off to a decent start, 4 goals. Bennett with 4. Ross Colton, who we mentioned, is available. Center, left wing, dual eligible in the 40s in terms of ownership. He is 4 goals in 5 games. Rantanen, Scheifele, the usual suspects. Peterka, we mentioned here, 4 and 5. Barbashev, 4 and 6. So a number of goal scorers. Here's Barrett Hayton down here, 4 goals in 6 games, 6 points in that span as well. Shot volume a little bit low, but you could probably find Hayton, Lundell, Chinakhov all on the waiver wire. Maybe even Casey Middlestat, low 30s% ownership for him. So a lot of people available on the wire if you're looking for goals. If you're looking for assists, not a lot of you are, but Evgeny Malkin, 9 assists in 6 games. Jack Eichel with 8 in 6. You've got Makar. You expect him to be there. Sam Reinhart, a goal scorer, but 7 assists on the year, 12 points in 7 games is excellent. You've got Nick Schmaltz, who I mentioned is available, 31% ownership. He's got 7 assists in 6 games. Mark Stone, not available in most leagues, but 7 in 6. You've got Stankoven, who's all assists right now, 7 and 6. Nason, 6 in 8 games. He is available, as we mentioned, around 14% ownership, dual left wing, right wing. Logan Cooley, don't look now, but an assist per game. A little bit low in the shot volume department, but getting you some power play exposure there. Connor Bedard, 6 assists in 6 games, only 1 goal. You would expect him to break out with some goal scoring in the future. And then the usual suspects going down. But here you got Broberg, who we did mention, at 5 assists in 6 games. So a number of players who are available, but obviously some of the usual suspects. Of these guys, Logan Cooley might be the only other guy available that we didn't touch on. He is 46% owned, so he might be there for you. He might not be there for you. In terms of raw points, this is just pretty much a breakdown of what we've already kind of gone over. Already went over this, but again, Reinhart, Panarin at the top, Malkin, really close to his career high, 11 points in 6 games. Down a little bit further, you've got Nason, who might be available, McCann, Barbashev, Lundell, Chinakhov, Teravainen potentially, Sam Bennett, and maybe Nick Schmaltz available as well. But a lot of these guys have been killing it right off the bat. Of these guys, I would look at the guys with the higher shots per game or some peripheral coverage. You got Nason here who's going to get you some hits, etc. You've got Trocheck here on this list at 7 points in 5 games, picking up where he left off. He's probably not available for you, but nonetheless, a lot of these guys have been getting it done. As we look at the top power play guys, Sanderson coming to the top of this list is nice to see if you drafted him late, kind of as a timeshare. Power play 1 quarterback, he's been getting it done for you, 6 power play points in 5 games. Teravainen, that's why you would grab him, 5 power play points in 6 games. Then you've also got a couple of guys down here. Matvei Michkov, he may be available for you, 4 power play points in 5 games. 65% owned, so he might not be there, but if you're in a shallow league and he is there, he is top power play. He has been relatively productive, a nice even split of goals and assists. A little bit further down, there's not a lot that you can get off the waiver wire. These are the usual suspects, but here's Chinikov, here's Nemesnikov with those 3 power play points. Tomas Hertl might be available for you. His point volume has been a little bit lower, but all 3 of his points on the power play. He's getting some hits and blocks along the way as well. And last but not least, we've got Ross Colton down here with 3 power play points in 5 games as well. So a number of guys that we've talked about already, so we're not going to go too much into detail. We'll move it on over to shot volume. Now, Austin Matthews leads the way at 5.6. You got Kucherov at 5.5, Forsberg 4.6, but then Anders Lee, 4.4 shots per game. He's only 12% owned right now, single position left winger for the Islanders. The points haven't come. The goals are kind of there. He's got 2 goals in 5 games, which isn't bad, but at 4.4 shots per game and 2.6 hits per game. So as I bring up his file, you can see the shot volume is elite level. The hits is really nice for a forward, which is something you like to see if you're in a peripherals league, a Cats league, where you're getting some hits exposure from a guy that might be a waiver wire pickup. Then you also have a couple of guys that were injured. You got Brian Rust, who was starting the season. He's only got 4 games under his belt, but 2 points, a power play point, 4.25 shots per game, and some Sidney Crosby exposure. 1.25 hits per game is nice to see from him as well. He might be owned up for you. 60% means he's probably gone in a 12-teamer, but in a 10-team league, he might be there, and anything shallower, he might be there as well. Usual suspects, Yossi Montour, Connor Stamkos. You got Blake Coleman here, which is interesting to see. Only 2 points on the year, but 3.8 shots, doing what he does best with shot volume and hits, 2 hits per game and a couple of blocks. The offense has not really been there as much as you would like, but you're getting the peripherals, so that's nice to see. You also have Brock Nelson from the Islanders. If you want to go that route, Brocktober is slowly ending as we enter into the final weeks of October, but 3.8 shots per game, only 2 goals in 5 games, so maybe you can get the tail end of Brocktober and get some value off of that. Not a lot of hits and no power play points to speak of yet. Kevin Fiala, really nice shot volume for him. Usually a setup guy, but he's been scoring 3 goals in 5 games, 3.8 shots, and some power play exposure there, 3 power play points on the year. A little bit further down, Nazem Kadri, do want to mention him. He's 3.6 shots per game, picking up right where he left off. He's a guy that I've gone to in the past, and obviously Calgary got off to a really hot start. He's 66% owned. Might not be there for you in a 12-team league or even a 10-team league, depending on what you're looking at on your waiver wire. Ross Colton, we've mentioned before, 3.6 shots. You're getting a ton of peripherals. Dougie Hamilton, he's still shooting the puck. Only 2 points in 8 games, but he's shooting the puck. He is on the top power play, and he is getting some hits and blocks. So at least he's doing that for you when he's not scoring. So that's something to keep in mind. It is a little worrying that Seamus Casey has way more power play points and points in general than Dougie Hamilton. Maybe he starts to take some power play minutes off of him. But with that said, the shot volume is still nice from Hamilton. And then Jeff Skinner, another guy you're getting a ton of shot volume out of. The goals have kind of been there. 2 goals in 6 games, 4 points. 1.17 hits is nice as well. So something to keep in mind if you're looking for shot volume. As we look at the hits leaders, you've got Kiefer Sherwood at 6.4 hits per game. He's 1% owned. You're getting 2.2 shots per game there, and you're getting a little bit of offense, 2 points in 5 games, a block along the way. So unbelievable hits totals from Sherwood so far. If you drafted Mo Seider, you're getting a ton of hits out of him, 5.8 hits per game, 4 blocks per game. Absolutely insane numbers. Definitely not sustainable, but nice to see. 3 points in 5 games along with that. So really complete defenseman so far. You've got Jeremy Lauzon, who might be available for you at 29% ownership, 5.4 hits per game, but not much else. You've got Liam O'Brien. He's available for you. Most of these guys will be. O'Brien at 1% ownership, 5 hits per game. Not much else there. Ross Johnston, he's 0% owned as well. He's going to get you 5 hits per game. One guy I do want to mention, Will Cooley. He is 3% owned, 4.8 hits per game, 2.2 shots. He's got 4 points in 5 games, playing on that third line with Hedl and Kakko in New York. They've been really good at controlling play in the zone, and he's been reaping the benefits offensively. So if you're looking for a hitter, a Tom Wilson type, but maybe not Tom Wilson with his insane pace right now, but Will Cooley, 4 points in 5 games, 4.8 hits per game is nice to see there. Jonah Gadjevich was hitting everything that moved, 4.3 hits per game. He is day-to-day. with some sort of injury, so he might not be available in the upcoming games. 1 point on the year is also not the best, but you'll have Mark Kastelik in Boston, similar type of production in terms of hits volume, and he's got 5 points in 6 games. Again, that maybe bottom 2 lines in Boston have been really effective for them, getting some points early in the season while Pasternak kind of starts to wake up. Hopefully he gets going soon. I drafted him in a couple different leagues, but 4.1 hits, 1.3 blocks, and some offensive production from Kastelik. He is 7% owned, so he's probably available for you. And then the rest of these guys, you know what you're going to get. A lot of these guys are relatively owned up, like Slavkovsky, who is hitting a ton, 3.67 hits per game. 6 points in 6 games is nice to see from him as well, but he's obviously owned up. The rest of these guys that do have the point numbers to go along with the shots or hits numbers are definitely the top end of the draft. Philip Forsberg, incredible shot volume, incredible hits volume as well, and he's a point per game. But again, Ross Colton is available, 3.6 shots, 3.6 hits. And then Scott Lawton, 4 points in 5 games, 3.6 hits, 1.4 shots is a little bit low, but you are getting some exposure. He does get you some shorthanded points as well. So these are some guys you can definitely find on the wire. As I look up Scott Lawton, only 6% owned, and he is a center left winger, so he should be available for you, and he does give you some positional flexibility as well. In terms of blocks leaders, a lot of the guys that we've already talked about, Sider, Gooley, Chad Ruedl's a sample size thing. He only got in the 1 game so far, 4 blocks, but he was getting walked left and right. Rasmus Anderson, decent for you there at 3.8. You've got Jacob Middleton at 3.8 as well. Martinez, you know what you expect out of him. Same thing with the blocks. Anderson is at least getting you some offensive production as well. He is relatively owned up, though. Same thing with Sanderson, who's also been a peripheral beast so far. He's owned up. Dursey would have been a really nice option as he was the power play 1 quarterback and getting a ton of shot blocks as well, but he is out for a little bit. I don't know what the time frame is, but he will be out for the foreseeable future. And then as we look at the rest of these guys, not a lot of these guys have offensive upside. You do have Texier down here. Only 1 game, but he did get 3 blocks in that game and an assist. So, again, small sample size type of thing there. But the usual suspects in terms of blocks, you've got Chris Tanev. You've got a number of guys that we've talked about in the preseason. Romanov. You've got Faravari, usually really good for hits and blocks. He's doing that right now, 3.25 of each. So a number of these guys should be available for you as they're not the power play quarterbacks. You're just not going to get that offensive production. Now, we've gone on a long time here today, so I'm going to cut it off there. If you got something out of this video, let me know in the comments section below. If you've got your eye on somebody that I didn't mention, please leave them in the comments as we can all build our collective knowledge as we head into week 3 of fantasy hockey. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you in the next one.